I always thought family gatherings were supposed to be about love and celebration. Instead, on Thanksgiving Day, my father called me a disappointment in front of everyone, then went pale as his boss addressed me as "Sir" across the dinner table. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. In that moment, the double life I'd been living collapsed, and with it, any possibility of pretending I was the daughter they wanted me to be. I had spent years trying to be someone I wasn't, just to keep the peace. But sometimes, peace comes at too high a price, especially when that price is your identity. The maple trees had already shed their leaves by the time I pulled into my parents' driveway in Lakeside, Connecticut. The November wind carried the faint scent of wood smoke and salt air from the nearby sound. I sat in my car, engine off, watching my breath fog the windows as I rehearsed the words I'd practiced 100 times on the 4-hour drive from Boston. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important. My name is Jessica Taylor, 28 years old, financial analyst at a respected firm, and living a life that looked perfect on paper. Except for one detail I'd kept hidden from my family. I was transgender. I had been living as my authentic self in Boston for over 2 years, using my chosen name, Jamie, and male pronouns with friends and colleagues. But every holiday, every family gathering, I would put on the costume of Jessica again. Uncomfortable dresses, hair styled the way my mother preferred, makeup I despised, a character I played to keep the fragile peace. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be different. I had promised myself it would be the last time I'd pretend. The invitation had come with my father's usual expectations. "Your mother is looking forward to seeing you in that blue dress she bought you for Christmas. Don't disappoint her." The house looked exactly as it always had, pristine white colonial with black shutters, a wreath of autumn leaves on the front door, warm light spilling from the windows. Perfect. Just like the image my father, Richard Taylor, regional director at Meridian Financial Group, demanded our family project. The Taylor family didn't have problems. We didn't have conflicts. And we certainly didn't have a transgender son. I grabbed the bottle of wine from the passenger seat, a peace offering that suddenly felt inadequate, and forced myself up the walkway before I could change my mind. My mother, Karen, opened the door before I could knock. "Jessica, finally." She pulled me into a hug that smelled of her signature perfume and cranberry sauce. "Everyone's already here. Your father was getting impatient." My stomach tightened. "Everyone?" "Your Aunt Linda and Uncle Rob. And your father invited his new boss for dinner. Mr. Henderson just moved to the area, and your father thought it would be nice to welcome him properly." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's bringing his son, too. Single, Harvard Business School." The matchmaking gleam in her eye made me feel ill. I had specifically chosen this Thanksgiving because I thought it would be just us. Easier that way. Less collateral damage. "Mom, I need to talk to you and Dad before—" "Later, honey. Your father's been working on this dinner arrangement all week. It's important for his promotion." She took the wine bottle from my hand and ushered me toward the living room. "Oh, and please tell me you brought that blue dress to change into—" "Before dinner?" I swallowed hard. "No, Mom. This is what I'm wearing. Simple black slacks, a button-down shirt, and a gray sweater. Comfortable. Authentic." Her smile faltered. "Well, I suppose that's professional, at least." The living room fell quiet as we entered. My father stood near the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, deep in conversation with a tall man I didn't recognize, presumably Mr. Henderson. Aunt Linda and Uncle Rob sat on the sofa, and a young man about my age stood awkwardly by the window. My father looked up, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "There she is." He walked over, giving me a stiff pat on the shoulder. "Jessica, come meet Walter Henderson, my new regional director." Mr. Henderson extended his hand with a warm smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Jessica. Richard talks about his daughter all the time." I shook his hand, increasingly aware that my window for having a private conversation with my parents was closing rapidly. "Nice to meet you, sir. And this is my son, Christopher." Mr. Henderson gestured to the young man by the window. Christopher gave a small wave. "Call me Chris." The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and mounting anxiety. My father kept mentioning my promising career as a financial analyst and how I was following in his footsteps. My mother strategically placed me next to Chris at every opportunity. And with each passing minute, the weight of my secret grew heavier. When dinner was finally announced, we moved to the dining room. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. The good china was out, the set only used for special occasions. My mother had outdone herself with turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of potatoes, and vegetables arranged like a magazine spread. My father stood at the head of the table, raising his glass for a toast. "I'm thankful this year for family, new friends, and new opportunities at Meridian." He nodded toward Mr. Henderson. "And I'm thankful for my beautiful wife and my accomplished daughter, who makes us proud every day." His eyes lingered on me, but there was something challenging in his gaze, as if daring me to contradict the image he was presenting. Mr. Henderson raised his glass. "To family and new friendships." We clinked glasses and began passing dishes. The conversation flowed around me. Business talk, local politics, holiday plans. I picked at my food, the rehearsed words stuck in my throat. "So, Jessica," Mr. Henderson turned to me. "Your father tells me you're at Eastbrook Financial? Impressive firm." I nodded, grateful for a neutral topic. "Yes, almost 3 years now." "They're lucky to have her," my father interjected. "Top of her class at Dartmouth. Always been my little girl with the big brain." I stiffened at the infantilizing words. Little girl. Each time he said it, it felt like a tiny needle. Though I wish she'd put that brain to use finding a nice young man, Aunt Linda chimed in with a laugh. "TikTok, right, Jessica?" My mother jumped in. "Well, Chris, didn't you say you were in financial analysis too? Maybe you and Jessica could compare notes sometime." Chris looked as uncomfortable as I felt. "Actually, I'm more on the tech side of things." Mr. Henderson smiled. "Both challenging fields. My son actually has a colleague who recently—" He paused, looking at me more closely. "Wait a minute. Forgive me, but do you go by Jamie at Eastbrook? I think my assistant mentioned collaborating with a Jamie Taylor from Eastbrook on the Westfield portfolio." The table went silent. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the plate. My father's voice cut through the silence. "No, her name is Jessica. Always has been." I couldn't breathe, couldn't look up, couldn't face the questioning looks. Mr. Henderson looked confused. "My mistake then, though the resemblance is remarkable." He turned to my father. "There's a young man at Eastbrook, Jamie Taylor, who's been coordinating with our team on a joint venture. Brilliant analyst. I just assumed when you mentioned your child worked at Eastbrook." He trailed off, noting the tension. "Jessica," my father's voice was sharp, "perhaps you can explain the confusion?" All eyes turned to me. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Not like this, not here, not now. But the moment had chosen itself. I set down my napkin and looked directly at Mr. Henderson. "There's no confusion, sir. I'm Jamie at work. I've been living as Jamie, as myself, for over 2 years now." The room went completely still. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Aunt Linda made a small, gasping sound. Chris stared at his plate. My father's face had turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "What are you talking about? This is absurd." Mr. Henderson seemed to realize the situation immediately. Richard, perhaps we should— No, Walter. I want to hear exactly what my daughter is saying. My father's eyes were locked on me, cold and unfamiliar. The moment of truth had arrived uninvited. But now that it was here, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. I'm transgender, I said, the words finally free after years of confinement. I've known for most of my life. In Boston at work, with my friends, I live as Jamie. As a man. Only here, only with family, have I been pretending to be someone I'm not. My mother's sob broke the silence that followed my words. But, you were such a pretty little girl. You wore dresses. You had dolls. Because that's what you wanted, Mom, what you expected. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And I tried. I tried so hard to be who you wanted me to be. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. You don't know what you're saying. This is some kind of phase or political statement. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Richard? No. My father held up his hand. I won't have this discussion at my Thanksgiving table. Jessica, you've clearly been influenced by that liberal city and those people you call friends. I've always worried about your lack of direction, but this is beyond disappointing. Each word was a stone, heavy and sharp. Disappointing. The ultimate condemnation in my father's vocabulary. Richard, Mr. Henderson's voice was firm. I think we should— I've put everything into this family, my father continued, his voice rising. Given you every advantage. And this is how you repay us? With some delusional— Mr. Taylor. Mr. Henderson's voice cut through my father's tirade. I apologize for the interruption, but I think I should clarify something. He turned to me, his expression kind but serious. Jamie, I didn't make a mistake earlier, did I? We met briefly at the Westfield presentation last month. You were introduced to me as Jamie Taylor. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat at this unexpected recognition. Yes, sir. He turned back to my father. Richard, your son is extremely well regarded at Eastbrook. In fact, the proposal he presented is why we're moving forward with the joint venture. The word son hung in the air like a thunderclap. My father stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, no sound coming out. His boss had just addressed me as his son, in his own house, at his carefully orchestrated dinner. My mother's quiet weeping was the only sound in the room. Chris, who had been silent throughout, suddenly spoke. Dad, maybe we should give the family some privacy. Mr. Henderson nodded. Yes, of course. He stood, placing his napkin beside his plate. Richard, Karen, thank you for your hospitality. We'll see ourselves out. As they moved toward the door, Mr. Henderson paused beside me. Jamie, your analysis on the Westfield project was exceptional. I look forward to working with you more directly in the future. And just like that, my professional self and my family self collided. The walls between my two lives crumbled, leaving me exposed in the wreckage. After the door closed behind our guests, the silence in the dining room grew oppressive. Aunt Linda and Uncle Rob exchanged uncomfortable glances. Perhaps we should also— Uncle Rob began. My father seemed to snap back to awareness. Yes, I think that would be best. They hurriedly gathered their things, Aunt Linda giving me a conflicted look that held both confusion and concern. Within minutes, they too were gone, leaving only the three of us in the suddenly cavernous house. My father turned to me, his expression unreadable. How long have you been lying to us? I haven't been lying, I said quietly. I've been surviving. Don't be dramatic. You've been dressing up and playing pretend like a child. My mother's voice was small, Did we do something wrong? Was it because your father worked so much? When you were little? Was it me? No, Mom. It's not about you. It's who I am. Who I've always been. My father paced the room, hands clenched at his sides. Do you have any idea what you've done? Walter Henderson is not just my boss. He's the regional director. How am I supposed to face him now? How am I supposed to explain this? There's nothing to explain, I said, a new steadiness in my voice. Mr. Henderson seems to understand. Better than you do. His head snapped up, eyes flashing. Don't you dare take that tone with me. Not in my house. Richard, my mother pleaded. Maybe we should all calm down and… Calm down? He laughed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound. My daughter announces she's playing dress-up at work, embarrasses me in front of my superior, and you want me to calm down. I'm not playing dress-up, I said, standing to face him. I'm living honestly for the first time in my life. And his name is Jamie, Dad. Your son's name is Jamie. My father stared at me as if I were a stranger. In that moment, perhaps I was. No, he said finally. My daughter's name is Jessica, and right now Jessica is a disappointment. There it was. The word I had feared my entire life. Disappointment. My father's ultimate judgment. I expected it to crush me, to send me retreating into apologies and promises to reconsider. Instead, something unexpected happened. The word bounced off me, falling flat between us. It had lost its power. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, gathering my coat. But I'm not sorry for who I am. My mother reached for my arm. Jessica, Jamie, please don't go. We can talk about this. We can figure it out. My father turned away, staring out the window into the darkness. If you walk out that door like this, don't expect to be welcomed back. My mother gasped. Richard. It's okay, Mom, I said softly. This isn't a surprise. I turned to my father's rigid back. I've spent my entire life trying to be good enough for you, trying to be the perfect daughter, the right schools, the right job, the right clothes, the right words. But it was never about being good enough, was it? It was about being who you wanted me to be. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my words. I'm going to walk out that door as myself, as Jamie. And whether or not I'm welcomed back is up to you. I kissed my mother's cheek, picked up my keys, and walked out into the cold November night. Behind me, I could hear my mother's pleas and my father's silence. Ahead of me lay uncertainty, but also truth. As I started my car, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. For the first time in that house, I saw my real self looking back. Not the facade I'd maintained for family gatherings. Not the performance of femininity I'd perfected to keep the peace. Just me. Jamie Taylor. I drove through the quiet streets of my childhood neighborhood, past houses glowing with warmth and family gatherings. The weight that had pressed on my chest for years had lifted, replaced by a curious lightness. I had lost something tonight, the fantasy of unconditional family acceptance. But I had gained something more valuable, the freedom of authenticity. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown. Number. Jamie, this is Chris Henderson. Got your number from Dad's contacts. Just wanted to say I think what you did tonight took incredible courage. If you need a friendly ear, I'm around. A simple message from a virtual stranger that somehow meant everything in that moment. I pulled over at a lookout point overlooking the Sound. The water was black under the night sky, reflecting distant lights from across the bay. I had come to this spot countless times during high school, trying to make sense of the disconnect I felt between who I was and who everyone expected me to be. I took out my phone again and opened social media. I had maintained 2 separate accounts. For years, Jessica for family and high school friends, Jamie for my real life. With steady fingers, I began typing a post on the Jessica account. Some of you have known me as Jessica. Today I'm introducing myself properly. My name is Jamie Taylor. I am transgender. This is who I've always been, even when I didn't have the words for it. I understand this may be surprising or confusing for some of you. I'm here to answer questions if they come from a place of respect. For those who choose not to continue this journey with me, I wish you well. For those who stay, thank you for seeing me. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, responses began appearing. High school friends expressing support, distant relatives asking confused but well-meaning questions, and silence from the people whose opinions had once mattered most. I put the car in drive and headed toward the highway that would take me back to Boston, back to the life I had built for myself. The life where I was already Jamie, where colleagues respected my work, where friends accepted me without question, where Mr. Henderson had recognized me without hesitation. That night, I checked into a hotel halfway back to Boston, too drained to complete the full drive. I sat on the edge of the generic hotel bed, finally allowing the events of the evening to fully sink in. My hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline wore off. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed continuously with notifications from my post, mostly supportive, some confused, a few cruel. I ignored them all and called the one person I knew would understand. "Marcus, it's Jamie. I did it. It didn't go well." Marcus had been my best friend since college, the first person I'd told about being transgender. He'd stood by me through every step of my transition. "I'm coming to get you," he said immediately. "Where are you?" No, I'm okay. I'm at the Harborview Inn, about 2 hours from Boston. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. "Tell me everything." And so I did. The awkward arrival, the unexpected guests, Mr. Henderson's recognition, my father's devastating words. With each detail, the knot in my chest loosened slightly. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Your dad's boss called you sir in front of everyone? And referred to me as Richard's son. You should have seen my father's face." "Poetic justice," Marcus said, a smile in his voice. "I know it's not funny, but it kind of is," I admitted, a small laugh escaping. "In a terrible way." We talked for another hour, Marcus helping me process the shock and pain, but also acknowledge the relief, the freedom of no longer maintaining the exhausting charade. "What now?" he asked finally. I stared at the ceiling, considering. "Now I go back to Boston, back to work, back to my life, my real life." "And your parents?" "That's up to them," I said softly. "I've spent 28 years trying to be who they wanted. I can't do it anymore." After we hung up, I opened my email. 3 new messages from my mother, subject lines increasingly desperate. "Please call me. We need to talk. Your father didn't mean it." Nothing from my father. I closed the email without reading them. Tomorrow, perhaps, I would be ready. Tonight, I needed to sit with my own truth, undiluted by their reactions. I fell asleep fully clothed on top of the hotel bedspread, emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter than I had felt in years. The next morning, I woke to a different sort of message. An email from Walter Henderson. "Jamie, I want to apologize for any discomfort my presence may have caused yesterday. Had I known the circumstances, I would have declined the invitation to give your family privacy. That said, I meant what I said about your work. You are an asset to Eastbrook, and I look forward to our continued professional relationship. On a personal note, my nephew is transgender. If you ever need resources or support, my door is open. Regards, Walter Henderson." I read the email 3 times, a wave of gratitude washing over me. In the midst of chaos, this small act of professional recognition and personal kindness felt like a lifeline. The drive back to Boston was quiet, the landscape a blur of late autumn brown and gray. I thought about family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we create. Marcus, who had offered to drive 2 hours to get me. My colleagues at Eastbrook, who had accepted Jamie without question. Mr. Henderson, who had seen me clearly when my own father couldn't. Chris, who had reached out with kindness to a virtual stranger. My apartment in Boston's South End felt like a sanctuary when I finally arrived. Simple, modern, and entirely mine. No family photos demanding explanations. No childhood mementos preserving a version of me that never truly existed. Just clean lines, open space, and the life I had built. For myself. I unpacked my overnight bag, hanging up the clothes I had carefully selected for a coming out that had gone sideways. As I emptied the side pocket, I found a small velvet box I had forgotten about. Inside was a simple silver tie clip I had bought months ago but never had the courage to wear around family. An affirmation. A declaration. I placed it on my dresser, a promise to myself. Never again would I hide who I was. Not for comfort, not for convenience, not even for family. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange limbo. I ignored the growing number of messages from my mother, needing time to process before engaging. I met Marcus for coffee, recounting the details I had been too tired to share the night before. I prepared for Monday's return to work, where I would face Mr. Henderson again, this time with my full identity known. By Sunday evening, a new email appeared in my inbox from my father. Subject: Moving forward. I stared at it for a long time before finding the courage to open it. Jessica, I've had time to think about Thursday's events. While I cannot pretend to understand or approve of your choices, your mother is distraught. For her sake, I am willing to discuss this situation further. Your mother and I raised you with clear values and expectations. We gave you every advantage. In return, we expected respect for our home and our principles. Your announcement, particularly in front of my colleagues, showed a disturbing lack of judgment. That said, you are still our daughter. If you wish to maintain a relationship with this family, we can meet to discuss boundaries and expectations going forward. Dad. The email was so perfectly, painfully my father. No apology, no acknowledgement of my identity, just conditions and expectations wrapped in the thinnest veneer of concession. I closed the laptop without replying. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a leash. And for the first time, I saw it clearly for what it was. Monday morning arrived, crisp and clear. I dressed with particular care. Charcoal suit, blue shirt, the silver tie clip displayed prominently. Professional, polished, and unmistakably myself. The Eastbrook offices were buzzing with post-holiday energy when I arrived. Colleagues greeted me with the casual warmth I had come to cherish. Morning, Jamie. Hey, Taylor, how was your break? Simple, uncomplicated acknowledgments of who I was. In the elevator, I found myself standing next to Mr. Henderson, who had apparently come for the joint venture meeting. Good morning, Jamie, he said with a nod. Good morning, sir. I hesitated, then added, Thank you for your email. It meant a great deal. He smiled slightly. My nephew often says that being recognized for who you are is not a kindness. It's a basic dignity. I'm simply treating you with the respect you deserve. He paused as the elevator doors opened. I spoke with your father yesterday. My stomach tightened. Oh? Professionally, nothing changes. You're excellent at your job, and that's what matters at Meridian. He stepped out of the elevator. Personally, I told him he has a son to be proud of. Whether he chooses to see that is up to him. I stood frozen as the elevator doors began to close, Mr. Henderson's words echoing in my mind. Your father has a son to be proud of. Throughout the meeting that followed, I felt a new kind of confidence. Not the brittle mask I had worn in my father's house, but something authentic that came from within. I presented my analysis clearly, answered questions directly, and engaged as my full self. Jamie Taylor, respected analyst, valued colleague, and transgender man. As the day wound down, I finally opened my personal email again. Among the growing pile of messages from extended family and old friends responding to my coming out post, there was a new one from my mother. "Jamie, I'm trying. I don't understand. Yet, but I'm trying. Your father is struggling more. Please be patient with us. This isn't what we imagined for you." But then, parents rarely get to choose their children's paths. I've been looking at old photos. There were signs, weren't there? Things I didn't see because I wasn't looking. The Halloween you insisted on, being a businessman instead of a princess. The way you'd slip into your father's suit jacket when he wasn't looking. How uncomfortable you were at prom in that dress I made you wear. I have questions. So many questions. But first I want to know, are you happy? Truly happy as Jamie? Love always. Mom. The tears came then, unexpected and overwhelming. Not from sadness, but from the glimpse of possibility in my mother's words. She was trying. She had signed the email, Mom, not Mother. And she had called me Jamie. I wrote back immediately. Mom? Yes. I am happier as Jamie than I ever was pretending to be Jessica. This isn't a phase or a political statement or a rejection of how you raised me. It's who I've always been. I have questions too, about where we go from here, about whether Dad can ever accept me, about what family means now. But thank you for trying. Thank you for asking if I'm happy. That's the question that matters most. Love, Jamie. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights come on as dusk settled over Boston. The road ahead would not be easy. My father's conditional, acceptance, my mother's confusion, the extended family's mixed reactions. These were realities I would have to navigate. But for the first time, I was navigating them as myself. As Jamie. Not hiding, not pretending, not diminishing myself to fit into someone else's expectations. Mr. Henderson's words came back to me. Your father has a son to be proud of. Whether my father ever saw it that way or not, I knew it was true. I had built a good life. I did meaningful work. I was honest, authentic, and finally free. Outside my window, the city hummed with life. Thousands of people, each with their own complicated stories, their own struggles for recognition and respect. I was just one among many. But tonight, that felt like enough. More than enough. I was Jamie Taylor. And for the first time in my life, that was all I needed to be. The next morning, I woke in my Boston apartment to sunlight streaming through half-drawn blinds. For a moment, disorientation clouded my mind. The familiar comfort of my own bed felt strange after the emotional hurricane of Thanksgiving night. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 29 text messages. Most from my mother, 3 from my father, and a scattering from extended family members who'd already heard some version of what happened. I ignored them all and made coffee, standing by my kitchen window overlooking the brick-lined street below. People hurried past, wrapped in scarves and winter coats, their breath forming small clouds in the November chill. Normal lives continuing, as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis. The memory of my father's face, first red with anger, then ashen as his boss called me "sir," replayed in my mind. His final words before I walked out lingered like smoke. If you walk out that door like this, don't expect to be welcomed back. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. 28 years of trying to be the perfect daughter. Straight A's. In school, captain of the debate team, Dartmouth with honors, the right job at the right firm, all attempts to earn the love that should have been unconditional. The sound of my phone vibrating against the counter pulled me from my thoughts. Marcus. You alive in there? His text read. Emergency brunch required. Theo's Diner, 1 hour, non-negotiable. A small smile broke through my melancholy. Marcus Jenkins had been my rock since college, the first person I'd trusted with my truth, the friend who'd helped me navigate the early stages of transition, who'd celebrated each small victory and held space for every setback. "I'll be there," I replied. "But I'm not talking about last night." "Noted. We'll talk about literally anything else. The history of spoons, quantum physics, those weird fish with lights on their heads." I laughed despite myself. "Anglerfish. And deal." Theo's Diner sat tucked between a used bookstore and a vintage record shop in Boston's South End. The weekend. Crowd created a comforting hum of conversation and clattering dishes as I pushed through the door, scanning for Marcus. He waved from a corner booth, already halfway through a cup of coffee. At 6'3" with broad shoulders and dreadlocks pulled back in a neat bun, Marcus commanded attention in any room, a fact that had been particularly helpful during my early transition, when his unwavering presence beside me had deterred more than one potential confrontation. "You look like hell," he said as I slid into the booth. "Good morning to you too." He pushed a mug toward me. "Already ordered your usual. Black coffee and blueberry pancakes coming up. You're a lifesaver." "I know." He leaned back, studying me. "So, quantum physics or anglerfish, your choice." "Neither." I sighed, surprising myself. "I think I need to talk about it after all." Marcus nodded, serious now. "I figured. Start wherever you want." And so I did. The whole story poured out. The unexpected presence of my father's boss. His recognition of me as Jamie. My father's humiliation and fury. The ultimatum. With each detail, the knot in my chest loosened slightly. "And now what?" Marcus asked when I'd finished. "I don't know. My mother's been texting nonstop. My father sent one email, all about how I embarrassed him and how he's willing to discuss boundaries if I want to maintain a relationship with this family." Marcus made a disgusted sound. "Always about him, isn't it?" "Always." I stared into my coffee. The thing is, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I need his approval. When he called me a disappointment, it just bounced off. Like the word had lost its power. "Because you finally know who you are," Marcus said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "And it's not who he wants you to be." Our food arrived, steaming plates piled high with pancakes, eggs, and hash browns. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the simple act of sharing a meal grounding me in the present. "So, what about work?" Marcus asked eventually. "Henderson is your dad's boss, but he's connected to your company too, right?" I nodded, swallowing a bite of pancake. "Joint venture between our firms. He seemed supportive, actually. Sent me an email yesterday saying my work was excellent and that he has a transgender nephew." "Seriously?" Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Plot twist." "I know." He apparently told my father that, professionally, nothing changes. I paused, pushing blueberries around my plate. And personally, he told my dad he has a son to be proud of. Damn. Marcus whistled low. Your dad must have loved that. I imagine not. The thought of that conversation, my father being told by his superior that his daughter was now his son, brought a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. What are you going to do about the rest of them? Your mom seems to be reaching out. I sighed, setting down my fork. She sent an email last night, asked if I was happy as Jamie, called me by my name. It's something. It's huge, Marcus corrected. She's trying. Yeah, I agreed softly. She is. After breakfast, Marcus and I walked through the public garden, the late November air crisp and clean. The park was quieter than usual, most people already ensconced in post-Thanksgiving shopping or family activities. A few hardy joggers circled the paths, and dog walkers bundled in scarves led their charges through patches of frost-covered grass. You're thinking too hard, Marcus observed as we crossed. The small bridge over the pond. I can hear the gears grinding from here. I managed a small laugh, just trying to figure out what happens next. What do you want to happen next? The question seemed simple, but it caught me off guard. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been subsumed by the desire to please my parents, to be the daughter they expected. Even after I began living as Jamie in Boston, my desires had been shaped by fear. Fear of discovery, fear of rejection, fear of losing the conditional love I'd worked so hard to earn. I want to stop pretending, I said finally. Not just with my parents, but with everyone. No more separate social media accounts. No more dodging questions about my family. No more hiding. Marcus nodded. Sounds like a good place to start. And I struggled to articulate the feeling. I want to stop caring so much about what my father thinks. I want his words to matter less. That one's harder, Marcus said gently. But it gets easier with time and distance. Trust me on that. He would know. Marcus had his own complicated history with family acceptance, having come out as gay to religious parents at 19. While they hadn't disowned him outright, their relationship had become a careful dance of expressed disappointment and mutual avoidance. We reached the edge of the garden, pausing at the crosswalk. Sunday traffic moved sluggishly along Beacon Street, and the sidewalks were beginning to fill with more people emerging from their homes to enjoy the clear day. Want to come over and watch terrible movies? Marcus offered. I've got a new collection of sci-fi disasters that will make you forget all about family drama. The offer was tempting. The easy comfort of Marcus's apartment, take-out Chinese food, and films so bad they became entertainment through sheer absurdity. But something pulled me in another direction. Thanks, but I think I need some time alone, I said. Rain check. Always. He hugged me, his embrace warm and solid. Call if you need me, okay? Anytime. I will. We parted ways at the corner, Marcus heading toward his apartment in Beacon Hill, me toward the T station that would take me back to the South End. On the platform waiting for the train, I pulled out my phone and finally opened my email. My finger hovered over my father's message, his conditional offer, his assertion that I was still his daughter despite everything. Instead of responding, I opened a new message and began typing an email to my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all the people who would inevitably be pulled into the vortex of this family earthquake. Dear family, I wrote. By now you may have heard various versions of what happened at Thanksgiving dinner. I want to tell you directly, in my own words, I am transgender. My name is Jamie Taylor. I have been living as a man in Boston for over 2 years, and now I am ready to live authentically in all areas of my life. I understand this may be surprising or confusing. I am open to questions that come from a place of respect and love. What I cannot accept are attempts to convince me that I am confused, going through a phase, or making a mistake. This is who I am. Some of you will choose to accept me as Jamie. Some won't. That is your decision to make. I hope for your acceptance, but I no longer require it to know my own truth. I paused, considering how to end the message. Finally, I added, for those who want to understand better, I am attaching some resources about what it means to be transgender. For those who want to maintain a relationship with me as Jamie, I look forward to building something new together. With love and hope, Jamie. I hit send before doubt could creep in. The train arrived, doors sliding open with a mechanical sigh. As I settled into a seat for the short ride home, a strange calmness washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission to be myself. I was simply stating who I was and letting others decide if they could accept that truth. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. I expected a rapid response from one of my more opinionated relatives. Instead, it was from Chris Henderson. Jamie, I know we barely met under the most awkward circumstances possible, but I wanted to check in. Dad mentioned you might be having a rough time. If you need a friendly ear from someone who understands complicated family dynamics, I'm here. No pressure. Chris. I stared at the message, surprised by the unexpected kindness from someone who had witnessed one of the most painful moments of my life. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Thanks, Chris. That means a lot. Might take you up on that friendly ear sometime. And sorry you got dragged into our family drama." His response came quickly. "No apology necessary. For what it's worth, I thought you handled it with incredible grace. Dad thinks so too." A small warmth kindled in my chest. Validation from unexpected sources seemed to be the theme of the weekend. First, Mr. Henderson, recognizing me as Jamie without hesitation. Now his son reaching out with genuine compassion. The train slowed as it approached my stop. I pocketed my phone and made my way to the doors, merging with the flow of people exiting onto the platform. The 3-block walk to my apartment building gave me time to consider my next steps. I had taken the plunge with my extended family, but there was still the matter of my father's email and my mother's tentative outreach. My apartment felt different when I returned. Still my sanctuary, but now with new meaning. This space had been the only place where I could be fully myself for so long. Now, that self was expanding outward, refusing to be contained within these walls. I settled at my desk, opened my laptop, and saw another new email notification. From my mother. "Jamie, thank you for your response. It helps to know you're happy. That's what I've always wanted for you, even if I didn't always know how to show it. Your father is struggling. I won't make excuses for him, but I ask that you try to understand. He comes from a generation and background where these things weren't discussed, where there was only one way to be. He's afraid of what others will think, of what this means for the image he's built, of having to relearn everything he thought he knew about his child. I'm not saying this to pressure you. You have every right to your boundaries and your truth. I'm saying it because I hope there might still be a path forward for all of us, even if it's not the one we expected. I've been doing some reading. There's so much I don't understand yet, so much I wish I had known sooner. Would you be willing to talk, just us, when you're ready? No pressure, no expectations. Just a mother trying to know her son better. With love, Mom." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. The simple acknowledgement, her son, felt like a gift I hadn't dared hope for. My mother, at least, was trying. She wasn't there yet, might never fully understand, but she was reaching across the divide with open hands instead of clenched fists. I composed a careful reply. "Mom, thank you for trying to understand. It means more than you know. I need some time and space right now, but yes, I would like to talk when things have settled a bit. Just us. No pressure, no expectations, as you said?" Dad's email was difficult. He made it clear that his main concern is appearances and his own comfort, not my well-being. I can't change who I am to ease his discomfort. I need him to understand that. I love you both, but I need to protect myself, too. This isn't a phase or a choice. It's who I've always been, even when I didn't have the words for it or the courage to live it openly. Take care of yourself. We'll talk soon. Love, Jamie. I sent the email, then turned to my father's message. His words still stung, their conditional acceptance a familiar wound. In the past, I would have capitulated, agreed to whatever terms he set just to maintain the fragile connection. The old hunger for his approval tugged at me, a lifetime habit not easily broken. But something had changed. My identity was not negotiable. My dignity was not something I would sacrifice, even for the father whose love I had sought my entire life. "Dad," I began, the words still feeling right despite everything. "I am your son. My name is Jamie. This is not a phase, a political statement, or a rejection of how you raised me. It's who I am. I understand this is difficult for you to accept. I understand your concern about appearances, about what others will think, but I cannot and will not pretend to be someone I'm not. Not anymore, not even for you. You spoke of boundaries and expectations. Here are mine. I expect to be addressed by my name, Jamie. I expect my identity as a man to be respected, even if you don't fully understand it. I expect that if we are to have any relationship moving forward, it will be based on who I actually am, not who you wish I was. These are not demands. They are simply the conditions under which I can exist honestly in the world. Whether you can accept them is your choice to make. I have always been your child. I have always sought your approval, your pride, your love. That hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is that I now understand that your approval cannot come at the cost of my truth. Mom says you're struggling. I understand that. But so am I, and so have I been for years, trying to be someone I'm not for fear of losing your love. I'm not doing that anymore. When you're ready to know your son, I'll be here. Jamie? I read over the email 3 times before finally sending it. There was no anger in the words, no blame, just a clear statement of who I was and what I needed. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a boundary with my father without apologizing for my existence. It felt terrifying. It felt right. The remainder of Sunday passed in a strange limbo. I cleaned my apartment, did laundry, prepared for the week ahead. Normal activities that felt different now that the compartments of my life were dissolving into one unified existence. Jamie at work, Jamie with friends, Jamie with family. Just Jamie, everywhere. By evening, responses to my family-wide email had begun trickling in. Aunt Sophia, my mother's sister, wrote simply, "I love you, always have, always will. What pronouns? Do you prefer?" Uncle David, my father's brother, sent a brief note. "This is a lot to process. Give us time." My cousin Eliza, always the family rebel, was effusive. "Finally. I always wondered why you seemed so uncomfortable at family gatherings. Can't wait to meet the real you." Not all responses were positive. My father's sister Susan replied with a lengthy message about confusion and modern influences, and how I would always be my niece. My grandmother didn't reply at all, which might have been its own answer. I checked my professional email one last time before bed and found a meeting request for Monday morning with Walter Henderson. The subject line read simply, "Westfield Project Follow-Up. Nothing to indicate our personal connection or the events of Thanksgiving. Just business as usual." Relief washed over me. Whatever happened with my family, my professional life remained intact. The work I had done, the reputation I had built as Jamie, these were solid, recognized, respected. That night, I dreamed of Thanksgiving dinners past, the stiff dresses my mother insisted on, the way my father would introduce me to colleagues, my daughter Jessica, Dartmouth graduate, following in my footsteps. The silent scream inside me each time, the feeling of erasure, of being rendered invisible even while standing in plain sight. Then the dream shifted. I stood at the same dining room table, but now dressed as myself, Jamie in a well-fitted suit, hair short, stance confident. My father introduced me. My son, Jamie. His voice clear, proud. In the dream logic, this felt not like fantasy, but memory, as if the rupture at Thanksgiving had never happened, as if acceptance had always been there. I woke at dawn, the dream lingering like a question mark. Could that future be possible? Or was it merely wishful thinking, the inner child still hoping for the unconditional love that had always been conditional? The early morning light painted my bedroom in soft blues and grays. I rose and dressed with particular care, my best. Suit, a crisp white shirt, the silver tie clip I had bought months ago but never worn around family. Today I would meet with Mr. Henderson, not as the confused intersection of Jessica and Jamie, but simply as Jamie Taylor, financial analyst. Professional, competent, authentic. The Eastbrook offices hummed with Monday morning energy when I arrived. Colleagues nodded greetings, asked about holiday breaks, complained about the return to routine, all the normal rhythms that had anchored my weekdays for years. No one treated me differently. Why would they? To them, I had always been Jamie. The normalcy was a balm after the weekend's upheaval. Here, I wasn't fighting to be recognized. I already was. I had just settled at my desk when my assistant, Leah, appeared with coffee. "Morning, Jamie. Henderson's running 15 minutes late. Said to tell you he'll meet you in the small conference room at 9:45 instead of 9:30. "Thanks, Leah. How was your Thanksgiving?" She rolled her eyes affectionately. "Chaotic. 4 kids under 10, my mother-in-law's special marshmallow sweet, potatoes that no one actually likes, and my uncle's political rants. The usual." I laughed, the easy exchange a reminder that life continued outside the bubble of my own drama. "Sounds about right. How about yours?" The question was innocent, routine. In the past, I would have offered a bland, non-committal answer. Nice, quiet, the usual, a protective hedge against the truth. "Eventful," I said instead. "Came out to my parents as transgender. Didn't go well with my father, but my mother's trying to understand." Leah's eyes widened momentarily, then softened. "That takes guts. I'm sorry it was rough." She hesitated, then added, "My cousin Alex is trans. Took the family a while, but most of us got there eventually. He says the first conversations are the hardest." "Thanks," I said, warmth spreading through my chest at the simple normalcy of her response. "I hope you're right. You need anything, you let me know." She gestured with her own coffee mug. "I make excellent stress relief lattes." After she left, I checked my personal email again. Still nothing from my father, but a new message from my mother. "Jamie, I understand you need time. When you're ready, I'd like to meet for lunch or coffee. Just us, as you said. Your boundaries make sense. I've told your father the same, though. I'm not sure how much he's hearing right now. I want you to know that I've joined an online support group for parents of transgender children. I'm learning. Slowly, imperfectly, but I'm trying. There's so much I wish I had known sooner. So many signs I missed because I wasn't looking for them. Take the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. Love always, Mom." I read the email twice, touched by her effort. She was doing research, joining support groups, actively trying to understand. It was more than I had dared hope for in the immediate aftermath of Thanksgiving. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Chris Henderson again. Any chance you're free for lunch today? Dad mentioned you two have a morning meeting, and I thought it might be nice to continue our very brief acquaintance under less dramatic circumstances. No pressure." I hesitated only briefly before replying, "Lunch would be great. There's a cafe across from Eastbrook called Page's. Meet at 12:30? Perfect. See you then." I tucked my phone away, a small smile playing at my lips. Life had a strange way of unfolding. The disastrous Thanksgiving that should have been the end of something was, perhaps, the beginning of something else entirely. At 9:40, I made my way to the small conference room, files in hand, professional mask firmly in place. Walter Henderson was already there, reviewing documents spread across the table. "Jamie, good morning," he said, rising to shake my hand. "Thank you for meeting on short notice." "Of course, sir." I took a seat across from him, arranging my materials in a neat stack. "I've prepared the latest projections for the Westfield venture, as requested." For the next hour, we discussed business, forecasts, risk assessments, implementation schedules. Henderson was thorough, insightful, occasionally challenging in his questions. I matched his professionalism, defending my analyses when needed. conceding points when appropriate. It was, by all measures, a productive meeting between colleagues. As we wrapped up, Henderson closed his portfolio and leaned back slightly. Excellent work as always, Jamie. I've told the Meridian team that Eastbrook has assigned their most capable analyst to this project, and today's discussion confirms that assessment. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the vote of confidence. He nodded, then hesitated a moment before continuing. On a more personal note, I want to reiterate what I said in my email. The events of Thanksgiving don't affect our professional relationship in any way. Your work stands on its own merits. I appreciate that. I maintained eye contact, refusing to shrink from the acknowledgement of our awkward shared experience. It means a great deal. My nephew, Henderson began, then paused. Perhaps that's not relevant here. It's all right, I said. I'd be interested to hear if you're comfortable sharing. He seemed to consider this, then nodded. My nephew came out as transgender 6 years ago at 17. The family struggled initially. My brother particularly. Old school, traditional views. He smiled slightly. Not unlike your father, I imagine. Not unlike, I agreed softly. It took time, difficult conversations. Some relationships were strained for a while. Buddy's family, and eventually that counted for more than discomfort or confusion. Henderson straightened his already immaculate tie. What I'm trying to say, perhaps not very elegantly, is that sometimes these situations improve with time. Not always, but sometimes. I hope so. The words came out more vulnerable than I intended. Your father is a proud man, set in his ways. But he's also intelligent and, I believe, deeply invested in family. Give him time. Henderson stood, gathering his materials. And in the meantime, know that your professional standing is secure, regardless of personal circumstances. Thank you, sir. I rose as well, extending my hand. For everything. He shook it firmly. I'll see you at the joint committee meeting next week. And Jamie? Well done on the Westfield analysis. Truly excellent work. As he left, I remained standing for a moment, taking in the normalcy of the interaction. It was both unremarkable and profound, a simple business meeting that acknowledged my identity without making it the center of the conversation. My work, my competence, my professionalism remained the focus. Jamie Taylor, respected analyst. Full stop. I gathered my materials and headed back to my office, a sense of steadiness settling over me. The weekend had shaken my foundations, but here, in this building, in this role, I knew exactly who I was. And that certainty would carry me through whatever came next with my family. My lunch with Chris Henderson felt surreal as we sat across from each other at Page's Cafe, the small bistro tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop across from the Eastbrook offices. The midday rush had begun, providing a steady background hum of conversation and clinking dishes that made our own exchange feel less exposed. So, Chris said after we'd ordered, him the turkey club, me the vegetable soup and half sandwich. This is definitely not how I expected Thanksgiving to go. I couldn't help but laugh at the understatement. Probably not what your dad had in mind when he accepted my father's dinner invitation either. Definitely not, Chris agreed, his smile surprisingly warm. Though Dad's pretty unflappable. 20 years in finance teaches you to roll with the unexpected. He was easier to talk to than I'd anticipated. At Thanksgiving, I'd barely registered Chris beyond noting his uncomfortable presence. Now, in the light of day, I could see he was perhaps a year or two younger than me, with his father's confident bearing, but a more relaxed demeanor. His button-down shirt was rolled at the sleeves, and a small rainbow pin adorned his laptop bag, a deliberate signal I didn't miss. Your dad mentioned he has a transgender nephew, I said, testing the waters. Chris nodded. My cousin Tyler. He came out about 6 years ago. It was rough at first, especially with my uncle, but things have settled. They have a good relationship now. That must be why your dad seemed so unfazed. He's had practice, Chris agreed. But he's also just a decent person. He believes in evaluating people on their merits, not their identity. He paused as our food arrived, waiting until the server had moved away before continuing. And speaking of merits, he's seriously impressed with your work on the Westfield project. That's good to know. I stirred my soup, appreciating the shift to professional territory. The joint venture has been challenging, but I think it's going to be profitable for both firms. Dad thinks so too. Chris took a bite of his sandwich, then set it down, a more serious expression crossing his face. Look, I know we just met, and under weird circumstances, but I wanted to check in because I know what it's like when family doesn't respond well to who you are. The rainbow pin suddenly made more sense. You're gay? I guessed. He nodded. Came out to my parents at 20. Mom was fine. Dad needed time, but he got there. My extended family was more mixed. Still is, honestly. I'm sorry. The simple acknowledgement felt inadequate. Don't be. It's been 7 years, and I've made peace with the fact that some people will never fully accept me. What I wanted to tell you is that it gets easier. The rawness fades. You build a life with people who see you clearly, and those who don't. Well, their opinions matter less with time. I took a spoonful of soup, letting his words sink in. Does it ever stop hurting completely? Chris considered this, his expression thoughtful. Not completely, no. Especially when it's parents. But it becomes more of an old ache than an open wound. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, people surprise you. They grow, they learn, they come around. Like your dad did. Like my dad did. He agreed. It took about a year of awkward conversations and some education on his part. Then, one day he called me and said, "I've been thinking about what you said last month and I think you're right." Just like that. He smiled at the memory. He's been one of my strongest advocates ever since. That gives me hope for my mother, at least, I said. She's trying. Joined a support group, if you can believe it. That's huge, Chris said. Really, when people make that kind of effort, it usually means they're in it for the long haul. And my father? Chris hesitated. I don't know your father well enough to say, but I know mine thought the world would end if his son was gay, and now he wears a pride, pinned to company events. People can surprise you. Our conversation shifted to more neutral ground after that. Our respective career paths, Boston restaurants we both enjoyed, our shared love of obscure documentaries. By the time we finished lunch, the initial awkwardness had dissolved into something that felt remarkably like friendship. As we prepared to leave, Chris said, "We should do this again sometime, under less emotionally charged circumstances." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "And Jamie?" he added as we stepped outside into the crisp November air. "What you did at Thanksgiving, owning your truth even when it would have been easier to stay silent, that took real courage. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words stayed with me as I walked back to the Eastbrook offices, a small bright spot in the complicated landscape I was navigating. An unexpected ally had emerged from the wreckage of Thanksgiving night. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of meetings and emails, the familiar rhythm of work providing a welcome structure. By evening, I was surprised to find several responses to my email to extended family members, more supportive than I had dared hope, though some remained silent. Their absence its own kind of answer. As I prepared to leave the office, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thinking of you today. The house feels empty. I hope work went well. Love, Mom." Simple words that carried the weight of effort. She was trying to reach across the divide without pressure or judgment. I texted back, "Work was good. Had lunch with Chris Henderson, actually. He's nice. Talk soon. J." I didn't promise a specific time or commitment, but the brief exchange felt like a small, tentative bridge being rebuilt. Tuesday morning brought unexpected news. An email from my father, terse and formal. "Jamie, I've reviewed your position. While I cannot pretend to understand or agree with your choices, I recognize that continuing to deny your identity will only result in estrangement. This is not what your mother wants, nor what would benefit either of us in the long term. I've spoken with Walter Henderson about maintaining professional boundaries despite the personal situation. He assures me this will not affect our working relationship, though I find it difficult to believe there won't be repercussions. Your mother has asked that I make an effort to use your preferred name and pronouns. I will attempt this out of respect for her distress, though it may take time for me to adjust. I suggest we meet in person after the holiday season to discuss how to move forward. Richard Taylor." No dad, no love, just his full name, as if signing a business correspondence. It wasn't acceptance, it wasn't even close. But it was acknowledgement, however grudging. He had used my name, Jamie, even while calling it preferred, as if it were a casual choice rather than my identity. He was willing to try, if only for my mother's sake. It was more than I had expected and less than I had hoped for. A beginning, perhaps, of a very long journey. I closed the email without immediately responding. This would require careful thought, not a hasty reply. Instead, I focused on the workday ahead, compartmentalizing as I had learned to do over years of navigating complicated family dynamics. The week progressed with a strange new rhythm. At work, nothing had changed. I was still Jamie, still respected for my analysis and insight. In my personal life, everything had shifted. Friends who had known my story already offered support. Those who hadn't expressed surprise, then typically acceptance. My mother texted daily, small, non-intrusive messages, pictures of the local park where she walked, a question about a book she was reading to better understand transgender experiences, a memory of me at 12, insisting on wearing my father's old suit jacket to a school presentation. Each message a small thread being carefully rewoven into a new kind of connection. By Thursday evening, I felt ready to respond to my father. I chose my words with precision. "Dad, thank you for your email. I appreciate your willingness to try using my name and pronouns, even if it's difficult for you. That effort matters. I agree that meeting after the holidays would be best, perhaps early January, when the initial reactions have had time to settle. I want to clarify something. Being transgender is not a choice or a preference. It's who I am and who I've always been, even when I didn't have the language for it or the courage to live authentically. I understand this is hard to comprehend if you haven't experienced it, but I need you to understand that this isn't something I decided on a whim or adopted from external influences. I'm glad you've spoken with Mr. Henderson. He has been professional and respectful throughout this situation, and I believe he values both our contributions to the joint venture. I hope we can find a way forward that allows for mutual respect, even if full understanding takes time. Jamie." I hit send before I could overthink it, then closed my laptop and went for a long walk along the Charles River. The evening was cold but clear, the city lights reflecting on the dark water like fallen stars. Other walkers and joggers passed by, each wrapped in their own thoughts, their own lives, their own complicated truths. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt a sense of possibility rather than loss. The ground beneath me had shifted dramatically, but I was still standing, still breathing, still moving forward one step at a time. Friday brought another unexpected development. A text from Chris. "Hey Jamie, some friends and I are having a casual gathering tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just dinner and probably board games because we're secretly 80 years old. Thought you might like to join if you're free. No pressure." The invitation caught me off guard. While our lunch had gone well, I hadn't expected it to lead to further social connections. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Sounds great. Should I bring anything?" Just yourself. And maybe dessert if you're feeling ambitious. 7 p.m., 1450 Beacon Street, Apt 3B. That evening, I found myself in the grocery store, debating between bringing a store-bought cake or attempting to bake something myself. The ordinary nature of the dilemma struck me as almost comical after the emotional weight of the past week. "Definitely homemade," came a familiar voice behind me. "Store-bought" says, "I fulfilled the social obligation." "Homemade" says, "I value this invitation." I turned to find Marcus eyeing the baking supplies critically. "Are you stalking me now?" "Pure coincidence," he insisted, holding up a basket containing cereal and microwave burritos. "The bachelor's feast. What's the occasion for baking?" "I got invited to a gathering tomorrow. Chris Henderson's place." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The boss's son who witnessed your Thanksgiving coming out? That Chris Henderson?" "The very same." I selected flour and sugar, adding them to my basket. "We had lunch earlier this week. He's actually really nice." "Interesting development." Marcus grinned. "From family drama to new social circles in under a week, you're adapting quickly." "It's just a casual gathering," I protested. "Board games and dinner with his friends?" "Uh-huh." Marcus's tone was skeptical. "And you're making what, exactly?" I was thinking chocolate chip cookies, simple but reliable. "Good choice. Hard to mess up, universally appealing." We moved together through the aisles, picking up the remaining ingredients I would need. It felt normal, this mundane shopping. Trip, this everyday friendship. A reminder that life continued beyond the seismic shifts of the past week. "How are things with the family?" Marcus asked as we joined the checkout line. "Any movement there?" "My mother's trying. Really trying, actually. My father—" I shrugged. "He's acknowledging my name at least, even if he thinks it's a preference, rather than who I am." "That's something," Marcus said. "Better than outright rejection." "Yeah, better than that at least." We parted ways outside the store, Marcus heading to his apartment, me to mine. The evening passed peacefully, making cookies, watching mindless television, answering a few work emails. A normal Friday night that felt like a gift after the emotional tumult of the previous week. Saturday morning, I woke to another text from my mother. "Found this while cleaning out the attic. Thought you might like to have it." Attached was a photo of me at perhaps 10 years old, dressed in my father's suit jacket and tie for a school career day. I was grinning widely, proudly displaying a homemade business card that read, "Jamie Taylor, CEO." I had forgotten about that day, about choosing that name even then, years before I understood why it felt so right. My mother had added a second message. "You tried to tell us all along, didn't you? We just weren't listening." I stared at the image, memories flooding back. The pride I'd felt wearing that oversized jacket, the rightness of introducing myself as Jamie to my classmates. The confusion when my teacher had gently corrected me. "You mean Jessica, sweetie?" The way I had insisted, "No, for business, I'm Jamie," as if that explained everything. And perhaps it had, in the only way my 10-year-old self could articulate. I saved the photo, then responded, "I remember that day. Dad's blue suit jacket. I loved wearing it. Thanks for finding this." She replied almost immediately, "There are others. Photos where I can see it now. The discomfort in dresses, the joy in more masculine clothes. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." "It's okay," I texted back. I didn't fully understand it myself until much later. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again as she composed her response. "When you're ready, I'd like to hear that story. How you came to understand, if you're willing to share it." Her request surprised me. Not demands or conditions, but genuine interest in my experience. "I'd like that," I replied. "Maybe coffee next weekend?" "I'd love that. Just tell me when and where." The exchange left me feeling lighter, a cautious optimism taking root. My mother was trying, not just to tolerate, but to understand, to see me as I truly was and had always been. With that warmth still buoying me, I spent the day running errands and preparing for the evening gathering at Chris's apartment. By 6:45 p.m., I was walking up Beacon Street, a container of still warm chocolate chip cookies in hand, a strange mixture of anticipation and nerves fluttering in my stomach. Chris's building was a classic Boston brownstone, well-maintained but showing the character of age in its detailed stonework and slightly uneven steps. I pressed the buzzer for 3B, and moments later heard his voice through the intercom. "Jamie, come on up." The apartment was warm and inviting, decorated with a blend of modern furniture and vintage finds. A record player quietly spun jazz in one corner, and the smell of something spicy and delicious filled the air. About a dozen people were already present, some helping with dinner preparations in the open kitchen, others chatting in the living room. "Jamie, glad you could make it," Chris said, greeting me at the door. "Everyone, this is Jamie Taylor, financial wizard and maker of excellent Westfield presentations. Jamie, this is everyone." A chorus of hellos and waves followed. I recognized a few faces from Meridian Financial Group, including a woman named Eliza who had been at one of our joint venture meetings. The others were unfamiliar but welcoming. "I brought cookies," I said, holding out the container. "Homemade?" Chris looked impressed as he accepted them. "Now I feel inadequate with my store-bought appetizers." "Total coincidence," I lied, remembering Marcus's assessment. "I just had the ingredients on hand." Chris laughed, seeing through the polite fiction. "Well, they smell amazing. Come on, I'll introduce you properly." The next few hours passed in a blur of good food, easy conversation, and increasingly competitive board games. Chris's friends were a diverse group, some from work, others from college, a few from his neighborhood. What they shared was a genuine warmth and lack of pretension that made me feel immediately welcome. As the evening progressed, I found myself sitting on the couch between Eliza from Meridian and a graphic designer named Kai, engaged in a heated debate about the merits of various strategy games. "Catan is basically advanced Monopoly with sheep," Kai insisted. "Once you've played Terraforming Mars, there's no going back." "Bold words from someone who bankrupted their entire colony in under an hour," Eliza retorted, laughing. The casual banter, the lack of weight or expectation, it felt like a breath of fresh air after the intensity of the past week. Here, no one was evaluating how they felt about my identity or recalibrating a lifetime of expectations. I was simply Jamie, a new friend who happened to have strong opinions about board game mechanics. Later, as people began to leave, Chris walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming," he said. "And for the cookies, which were devoured in record time." "Thanks for inviting me," I replied sincerely. "I had a great time." He hesitated slightly before adding, "We do this most weekends, rotating apartments. You're welcome anytime. No formal invitation needed." The offer touched me more than I had expected. "I might take you up on that." "I hope you do." His smile was warm. "It's good to have people, especially when family stuff gets complicated." Voice of experience? Very much so. He leaned against the doorframe. "When I first came out, I spent a lot of time alone, thinking that was safer than risking rejection. It took me too long to realize that isolation was doing more damage than any negative reaction ever could." His words resonated deeply. How many times had I declined invitations, avoided social gatherings, kept to myself rather than risk being misgendered or misunderstood? How much of my life had I put on hold, waiting for some mythical moment when everything would be resolved? With my family? "I'm working on that," I admitted. "Being more open, more present." "It gets easier," Chris assured me. "And having friends who get it, or at least try to, makes all the difference." Walking back to my apartment through the quiet city streets, I felt a sense of expansion. as if my life were growing beyond the narrow confines I had unconsciously set for it. For so long, my energy had been consumed by the dual existence I maintained: Jamie in Boston, Jessica with family. Now that those worlds had collided, painful as it had been, something new was emerging from the wreckage. Sunday morning dawned, cold and bright, the kind of clear winter day that makes Boston shine. I woke early, drawn out of bed by sunlight streaming through my blinds and an unusual sense of energy. After a quick breakfast, I found myself opening my laptop to an email draft I had started and abandoned multiple times over the past week. It was addressed to my father. Not the careful, measured response to his conditional acceptance, but something more honest, more vulnerable. Words I had held back for fear of rejection, for fear of appearing weak in the face of his judgment. Today, those fears felt smaller, less consuming. Perhaps it was the reminder from last night that I wasn't alone, that I had people, old friends, like Marcus, new connections like Chris, colleagues who respected me for my work rather than how well I performed an assigned gender role. I began typing, letting the words flow without self-censorship. Dad, I've been thinking about what to say to you beyond the careful, polite response I sent earlier. The truth is, I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm disappointed that when faced with my authentic self, your main concern was how it would affect your image at work, not how I had been suffering in silence for years. But beneath that anger is something else. Grief. Grief for the relationship I always hoped we could have. Grief for the father who might have said, "I don't understand this, but I love you and we'll figure it out together." I know this isn't what you expected for your child. I know it challenges everything you thought you knew about me, about family, about the future. I know it's uncomfortable and confusing and probably embarrassing for you, especially happening the way it did. What I need you to understand is that it wasn't what I expected either. Do you think I wanted to be transgender in a world that still treats people like me as a problem to be solved? Do you think I chose this path when a different one would have been so much easier? I tried, Dad. For years, I tried to be the daughter you wanted. I excelled academically. I chose the career you respected. I dressed the way Mom wanted for family gatherings. I dated men I had no interest in. I did everything I could to earn your approval except the one thing I couldn't do: be someone I'm not. The truth is, I've always been your son. From that career, day in 5th grade when I insisted on being called Jamie, to the summers I begged to do yard work with you instead of shopping with Mom, to my unending discomfort in every dress I was ever made to wear. The signs were there, if anyone had been looking. I don't expect you to understand immediately. I don't expect you to be comfortable with this overnight. What I do expect, if we're to have any relationship moving forward, is respect for who I am, not who you wish I was. You taught me to stand up for myself, to speak the truth even when it's difficult, to live with integrity. That's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm finally living with integrity by being honest about who I am. I hope someday you can be proud of that, even if it's not the path you would have chosen for me. Jamie, I read over the email twice, feeling the truth of every word. It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't careful. It was raw and honest in a way I rarely allowed myself to be with my father. My finger hovered over the send button, hesitation creeping, and then I remembered Chris's words from the night before. Having friends who get it, or at least try to, makes all the difference. My father might never fully get it, but perhaps the first step was showing him the unvarnished truth of my experience, not just the sanitized version I thought he could handle. I hit send, then closed my laptop and went for a long run along the river, letting the physical exertion clear my mind and settle my nerves. By the time I returned, showered, and checked my email again, there was no response from my father. I hadn't really expected one so quickly. This kind of message required processing time, especially for someone as emotionally reserved as Richard Taylor. Instead, there was an email from my mother. Jamie, Looking forward to coffee next weekend. Would Saturday at 11 a.m. work for you? There's a place called Reverie near your apartment that looks nice. I've been doing more reading and joined a virtual support group that meets weekly. It's helping me understand better, though I still have so much to learn. I found more photos I thought you might like to see. Moments where I can now recognize you were trying to tell us who you were. I'll bring them when we meet, if that's okay. Love always, Mom. I replied, confirming the time and place, a mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling within me. The idea of seeing my mother, of having our first real conversation since Thanksgiving, was both exciting and terrifying. Would the tentative understanding she expressed in emails translate to acceptance in person? Would she still see her son when sitting across from me? Or would old patterns resurface? Later that afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered to find Walter Henderson's voice on the other end. Jamie, I hope I'm not interrupting your Sunday. Not at all, sir, I replied, surprised by the personal call. I wanted to let you know that I had lunch with your father yesterday, he said directly. A professional courtesy that became something more personal. I hope you don't mind that I shared some of my family's experience with my nephew's transition. I sat down on my couch, taken aback by this development. I don't mind, I said cautiously. How did he respond? About as you might expect, Henderson said, a hint of dry humor in his tone. Defensive initially, concerned about appearances. Eventually, a bit more receptive. He's a proud man, your father, set in his ways. But he's not unintelligent, and he did seem to be listening by the end. Thank you for doing that, I said, genuinely moved by his intervention. You didn't have to get involved in a personal situation. Perhaps not, Henderson agreed. But sometimes people need to hear difficult truths from unexpected sources. Professional peers can sometimes speak to each other in ways family cannot. He paused briefly. And frankly, I remember how much it helped my brother to have outside perspectives when my nephew came out. Sometimes it's easier to hear these things from someone who isn't emotionally invested in the outcome. Did it make a difference? I couldn't help asking. That's not for me to say, Henderson replied diplomatically. But he did listen, which is more than he might have done a week ago. Progress is rarely linear in these situations, Jamie. It comes in fits and starts, in small moments of understanding amid the confusion. At least, that's been my experience. After we hung up, I sat for a long time looking out my apartment window at the city below. People moved through their Sunday routines, walking dogs, carrying groceries, meeting friends for late brunches, normal lives unfolding in all their mundane glory. Somewhere across the city, my father was processing his conversation with Henderson, perhaps seeing my situation through new eyes, perhaps entrenching further in his resistance. I couldn't control his response. I could only continue living authentically, building the life I wanted from the pieces I had, friendships old and new, professional respect, and the tentative beginning of a transformed relationship with my mother. That evening, as I prepared for the work week ahead, my phone chimed with one more unexpected message. From Chris. Hope you got home okay last night. Everyone loved meeting you, especially Kai, who says you have impeccable board game strategy. High praise from our resident champion. Next gathering is at Eliza's place Saturday after next. Consider yourself officially part of the rotation. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with family acceptance and everything to do with finding community in unexpected places. Count me in, I replied. But warn Kai I've been practicing my resource management strategy. As I set my phone down, a sense of peace settled over me. Not the false peace of hiding who I was, but the genuine tranquility that comes from living in alignment with truth. The road ahead would not be smooth. There would be difficult conversations, setbacks, moments of doubt and pain. But there would also be this: authentic connections, new beginnings, and the freedom of being fully, unapologetically myself. The week passed in a blur of work deadlines and preparation for my upcoming coffee with my mother. Each day brought small normalcies that were remarkable only in their ordinariness. Morning meetings where colleagues addressed me as Jamie without hesitation, lunch breaks with work friends who asked about my weekend without awkwardness, evening, texts from Chris inviting me to join his friends for a movie night that I regretfully declined due to a project deadline. By Friday afternoon, a nervous energy had settled in my chest. Tomorrow I would see my mother for the first time since Thanksgiving. Our emails and texts had been cautiously positive, but face-to-face interaction would be the true test of her newfound understanding. As I wrapped up my final report for the day, Leah appeared at my office door. "Package for you," she said, holding up a small padded envelope. "Came by courier, not regular mail." Curious, I accepted it, noting the lack of return address. "Thanks. Leah, have a good weekend." "You too," she said with a warm smile. "Any plans?" The simple question carried no weight for her, but for me, it held volumes. "Meeting my mother for coffee tomorrow," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "Nice," she said, completely unaware of the significance. "Enjoy." After she left, I opened the package to find a small velvet box containing a silver tie, pin, simple, elegant, with a subtle engraving of a compass rose on one end. A note accompanied it. "Jamie, thought you might like this for your collection. Everyone needs direction sometimes. Looking forward to our next board game battle. Chris." The unexpected gift brought a smile to my face. It was thoughtful without being overly personal, acknowledging our growing friendship without presumption. I texted him a quick thank you, tucking the box into my desk drawer to take home later. As I packed up to leave, my phone rang with an unknown number. Thinking it might be Chris, I answered without checking. "Hello? Jamie?" My father's voice came through, stiff and formal but unmistakable. I froze, caught entirely off guard. "Dad, hi." A pause stretched between us, both of us apparently unsure how to proceed with this first direct conversation since Thanksgiving. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Your mother mentioned your meeting tomorrow." "Yes," I said cautiously. "For coffee." Another pause. I could almost see him in his office, back straight, expression carefully controlled. "She's been upset since Thanksgiving." The words held an accusation, but I refused to accept the blame. "We've all been dealing with a difficult situation." "Yes, well." He sounded uncomfortable. "I wanted to... That is, I read your email." My heart rate accelerated slightly. The vulnerable, honest email I'd sent on Sunday. Had it been a mistake? After all? "I don't understand," he continued, the words seemingly difficult for him. "I don't know if I can understand, but Walter made some points that I've been considering." "What points?" I asked, genuinely curious about what Henderson had said to make an impression on my stubbornly traditional father. That this isn't a phase or a choice, that the science supports. He paused, as if the words were unfamiliar on his tongue. Gender identity as innate. That my nephew, his nephew, is the same person he always was, just more authentic now. I remained silent, letting him work through his thoughts without interruption. "I've always valued facts, data, evidence," he continued. "I can't simply dismiss medical consensus because it's inconvenient or challenges my preconceptions." Each word sounded carefully rehearsed, as if he'd practiced this speech. "So I'm making an effort to educate myself." "That means a lot," I said quietly. "Don't misunderstand," he added quickly. "I'm not saying I'm comfortable with this. I'm not saying I agree with your choices." "It's not a choice, Dad," I interrupted, gentle but firm. "That's the whole point." He sighed, a long exhale that carried decades of rigid thinking, Your identity, then. I'm trying to understand it as a medical reality rather than a personal decision. That's the best I can offer right now. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't even close to the embrace I'd once hoped for. But it was movement. My father, Richard Taylor, who had never admitted being wrong about anything in his life, was making an effort to reconsider his position based on evidence. "Thank you for telling me this," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "It means more than you know." "Yes, well?" He sounded uncomfortable again. "Your mother asked me to call, to let you know I'm working on it." Of course. My mother had orchestrated this conversation, trying to prepare the ground for tomorrow's meeting. "I appreciate that. I should go," he said abruptly. "There are reports I need to review before Monday." "Okay, thanks for calling, Dad." He made a non-committal sound, then added, "Jamie," before hanging up, the name clearly difficult for him to say but deliberately chosen. I sat at my desk long after the call ended, processing the unexpected conversation. My father was trying, grudgingly, conditionally, but trying nonetheless. The knowledge felt like a small flame in a dark room, not enough to fully illuminate, but enough to see the outlines of a possible future. By the time I arrived home, the nervous energy had transformed into something more complex. Hope tinged with caution, anticipation mixed with lingering hurt. I spent the evening preparing for tomorrow's meeting as if it were a critical business presentation, considering possible conversation paths, emotional landmines to avoid, and key points I wanted to make. Marcus called around 9, his timing, uncanny as always. "Just checking in on the pre-mom meeting jitters I know you're having?" I laughed, grateful for his perception. "That obvious, huh? You've only been dreading and planning for this all week? How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, actually," I said, recounting my father's surprising call. "It's not acceptance, but it's not rejection either," Marcus finished for me. "That's significant, Jamie. You know how your dad is. Might as well try to move a mountain as change his mind once it's set." Henderson must have made quite an impression. Or your dad values your relationship more than his pride, even if he can't admit it yet. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. The possibility that beneath my father's rigid exterior, there might be a genuine desire to maintain our connection, even when it required him to reconsider deeply held beliefs. "What about tomorrow?" Marcus asked. "Need moral support? I could accidentally show up at the same cafe, sit nearby with a newspaper like an undercover agent." The image made me laugh. "Tempting, but I think this is something I need to do alone. Besides, you'd make a terrible spy. You're 6'3" with purple-tipped dreadlocks right now." "Fair point," he conceded. "But the offer stands. Text me if you need extraction." "Will do." After we hung up, I found myself standing at my bedroom window looking out at the city lights. Boston had been my refuge, the place where I could be truly myself while maintaining the elaborate fiction for my family. Now those boundaries had dissolved, leaving me both more vulnerable and more authentic than I'd ever been. I slept restlessly that night, waking several times from dreams I couldn't quite remember, but that left me with a lingering sense of being pursued. By morning, I felt less rested than I'd hoped, but determined to face the day with as much calm and clarity as possible. Reverie Cafe was a small, modern space tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop in my neighborhood. Its proximity to my apartment had been my mother's suggestion, a small courtesy that acknowledged this conversation would be difficult enough without adding the stress of unfamiliar surroundings. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet table in the corner where we could talk without being overheard but still have the buffer of public space. The cafe was moderately busy with weekend patrons, students with laptops, couples sharing pastries, friends catching up over coffee. Normal people having normal Saturday conversations, unaware of the emotional significance of what was about to unfold at my corner table. At precisely 11 o'clock, my mother walked through the door. She paused just inside, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. Something in her expression shifted, a small softening around the mouth, a tentative warmth in her gaze. She looked different somehow, or perhaps I was seeing her differently now that the pretense had fallen away. She wore a simple wool coat over slacks and a sweater, her shoulder-length brown hair, now with more gray than I remembered, tucked behind her ears. She carried a small manila envelope under one arm. As she approached, I stood, unsure of the proper greeting for this new territory we were entering. She solved the dilemma by embracing me, a quick, tight hug that felt both familiar and strange. "Jamie," she said quietly, "thank you for meeting me." The use of my name, spoken aloud, hit me with unexpected force. In all our email and text exchanges, she had been calling me Jamie, but hearing it from her lips made it real in a way the written word hadn't. "Thanks for coming into the city," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Can I get you something? They make a great chai latte here." "That sounds perfect," she said, unwinding her scarf. "And maybe one of those almond croissants? The ones in the case look divine." The normalcy of the exchange, discussing coffee, and pastries as if this were any Saturday meeting, created a surreal layer over the emotional weight of the moment. I went to the counter and ordered our drinks and pastries, using the task to gather my thoughts and steady my nerves. When I returned to the table, my mother had removed her coat and placed the manila envelope on the table between us. She looked up as I set down our drinks, a small smile on her lips. "This place is lovely, very you." "What makes it very me?" I asked, curious about what she meant. She gestured around the space, the exposed brick walls, the minimalist furniture, the carefully curated selection of local art. Clean lines, no unnecessary frills, but still warm and inviting. You've always had good taste. The observation surprised me. Had she always seen me so clearly in some ways while missing the fundamental truth of who I was in others? "Thank you for the photo you sent," I said as I sat across from her. "The one from Career Day." She nodded, tapping the envelope. "I found more, if you'd like to see them." "I would." She opened the envelope and carefully extracted a small stack of photographs, handling them with a reverence that spoke of hours spent examining these images, seeing them with new eyes. These were scattered through different albums, but looking back now, there's a pattern I should have recognized. She slid the first photo across the table, me at 7 or 8, scowling in a frilly Easter dress, while my cousins posed happily beside me. Another followed, me at 12, hair cut short after begging my mother for weeks, beaming with a confidence rarely captured in other photos from that period. A third showed me in high school, wearing a suit for a debate tournament, standing tall and assured in a way that vanished in photos where I wore more feminine attire. One by one, she shared these glimpses into my past, moments where my true self had been visible to anyone paying attention. With each image, she offered a small comment, a memory of something I'd said, an observation about how happy or uncomfortable I looked, a connection she had only recently made. "You told me once, when you were maybe 9, that you felt like you were wearing a costume every day," she said, touching a photo where I stood stiffly in a bridesmaid's dress at my cousin's wedding. "I thought you meant you preferred jeans to dresses, but it was more than that, wasn't it?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It was my whole self that felt like a costume. Every day, in every interaction, pretending to be someone I wasn't." She nodded, slowly, pain and understanding mingling in her expression. "I'm so sorry, Jamie. Sorry we didn't see it. Sorry we made it harder by insisting on dresses and feminine things that clearly made you miserable." "You didn't know," I offered, not to absolve her, but to acknowledge the truth. "I didn't fully understand it myself until college." "When did you know for certain?" she asked, her fingers tracing the edge of a photograph. When did you realize you were transgender? The question was asked with genuine curiosity, not judgment. I took a sip of my coffee, considering how to explain a realization that had come in stages rather than a single moment of clarity. There wasn't one specific day, I said finally. It was more like putting together pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered throughout my life. In high school, I knew something felt wrong, but I didn't have the language for it. I just knew. I was happiest when people mistook me for a boy, which happened sometimes when I kept my hair short and wore certain clothes. She nodded, encouraging me to continue. In college, I met people who were transgender, and their experiences resonated with me in a way that was both frightening and illuminating. I started researching, reading memoirs, talking to people, and gradually the pieces came together. This wasn't about disliking dresses or preferring short hair. It was about a fundamental disconnection between who I knew myself to be and how the world perceived me. And you began living as Jamie in Boston after college? She asked. Not right. Away. I was afraid of losing everything. My job, my friends, my family. So I lived a double life for a while. Jessica at home and with family, Jamie at work and with friends who knew. It was exhausting, constantly switching between identities, always, afraid of someone from one world discovering the other. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That sounds so lonely. It was, I admitted. That's why when Mr. Henderson recognized me at Thanksgiving, it felt like both a disaster and a relief. The worlds were colliding, but at least I wouldn't have to keep them separate anymore. She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch hesitant at first, then firmer. I'm glad you don't have to hide anymore. Even though it happened, in probably the most awkward way possible. A small laugh escaped me. Definitely not how I planned to come out to you and Dad. Speaking of your father, she said cautiously, he mentioned he called you yesterday. He did. It was unexpected. He's trying, Jamie, in his own limited, stubborn way. The conversation with Walter helped, I think. Hearing from a man he respects that this isn't a political statement or a phase but a medical reality, it gave him a framework he could understand. I noticed he kept emphasizing the medical aspect, I observed, as if he needs it to be a diagnosed condition to accept it. It's his way of making sense of something that challenges everything he thought he knew about gender, about you, about his own role as a father. She sighed, stirring her chai. He's reading articles from medical journals, watching documentaries. Very Richard. Approaching it like a research project. Better than rejecting it outright, I acknowledged. Much better. She squeezed my hand once more before releasing it. He's not there yet, may never fully get there, but he doesn't want to lose you, even if he can't quite say it directly. The admission hit me with unexpected force. My father, who had called me a disappointment at Thanksgiving, was now actively working to understand because he didn't want to lose me. It wasn't the unconditional acceptance I'd once hoped for, but it was far more than the total rejection I'd feared. And you? I asked, meeting her eyes directly. How are you processing all this? She took a deep breath, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Honestly, it's been a roller coaster. Shock, confusion, grief, guilt, so much. Guilt for not seeing the signs, for pushing you into clothes and activities that must have felt like torture, for all the times I must have hurt you without realizing. You couldn't have known, I said again. Perhaps not entirely, but there were signs I chose not to see. She gestured to the photos spread between us. Looking at these now, it seems so obvious. The discomfort in feminine clothes. The joy when you were allowed to express yourself in more masculine ways. Your insistence on Jamie for that career day. Little clues that I missed or dismissed. She took a sip of her chai, gathering her thoughts. The support group has been helpful. Hearing from other parents at different stages of acceptance, learning from their mistakes and successes. It's made me realize that my initial reaction, seeing this as something happening to me rather than something that's always been part of you, was self-centered. Her self-awareness surprised me. That's really insightful, Mom. I'm trying, she said simply. I want to understand. I want to be part of your life. And that means seeing you as you truly are, not as I expected you to be. We talked for nearly 2 hours, the conversation flowing more easily than I had dared. Hope. She asked thoughtful questions about my transition, my experiences living as Jamie in Boston, my friends, my work. I shared stories I'd never thought I'd be able to tell her, about Marcus helping me shop for my first proper suit, about, the relief of being addressed by my name and pronouns at work, about the freedom of finally living authentically. In turn, she shared her own journey of the past weeks, the support group meetings, the books and articles she'd read, the conversations with friends whose initial reactions had ranged from supportive to bewildered. She spoke about the challenge of correcting people who still referred to me as Jessica, about learning to use different pronouns, about the strained silence that fell when certain relatives brought up my name. Aunt Susan sent me a long email about how we're enabling you, she admitted, rolling her eyes slightly. I wrote back that the only thing we enabled was years of forcing you to be someone you weren't, and that we're trying to do better now. She hasn't replied. The fact that my mother had defended me to her own sister-in-law, the formidable Susan who had intimidated me throughout my childhood, felt like a significant milestone. She wasn't just accepting me privately, she was advocating for me publicly. As our time together drew to a close, she gathered the photographs and returned them to the envelope. "These are for you," she said, sliding it across the table. "They're your history, your journey. I thought you might want them." The gesture moved me deeply. These weren't just photos. They were evidence of a truth that had been present all along, validation that my identity hadn't emerged from nowhere, but had been woven into the fabric of my life from the beginning. "Thank you," I said, accepting the envelope. "This means a lot." As we prepared to leave, she hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider coming for dinner sometime? Not a big family gathering, just us. Maybe in a few weeks, when things feel a bit more settled?" The invitation hung between us, both an offer and a question. Was I ready to return to the house where I had been rejected? Was I willing to risk another painful encounter with my father? "I'd like that," I said finally, "but I need it to be on terms that respect who I am. No dead naming, no wrong pronouns, no treating me as if I'm going through a phase." "Of course," she agreed immediately. "Those are completely reasonable boundaries. I'll make sure your father understands." We walked together to the street, where she hailed a cab to take her back to the train station. Before getting in, she hugged me again. Longer this time, more certain. "I love you, Jamie," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for being patient with us while we catch up to who you've always been." As the cab pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The conversation hadn't been perfect. There had been moments of tension, of unintentional missteps, of old patterns threatening to resurface. But beneath it all had been a fundamental shift, my mother seeing me, truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time. I walked home through the crisp December air, the manila envelope, tucked securely under my arm. The city bustled around me, holiday shoppers carrying bags, street musicians playing seasonal tunes, couples walking hand in hand. Normal life continuing while my world rearranged itself yet again, this time with more hope than fear. When I reached my apartment, I found a text from Chris. "How'd it go with your mom? If you need to decompress, we're at Kai's playing that new strategy game you mentioned. No pressure, but the door's open." The invitation was tempting, the easy camaraderie of new friends, the distraction of games and conversation, the normalcy of a Saturday afternoon gathering. But I felt the need for solitude to process the emotional weight of the morning's conversation. Thanks, but I think I need some quiet time, I replied. Coffee with Mom went surprisingly well. Rain check on. The game? Absolutely, came his quick response. Glad to hear it went well. Offer stands if you change your mind. I spent the afternoon sorting through the photographs my mother had given me, arranging them chronologically on my coffee table like puzzle, pieces of my identity finally coming together. The unhappy child in Easter dresses, the jubilant 10-year-old in an oversized suit jacket, the teenager with short hair and masculine clothes whenever possible, the college student whose smile never quite reached their eyes in formal photographs, and underneath it all, visible now with the clarity of hindsight, was Jamie. Always Jamie, trying to emerge despite the expectations and assumptions that had kept him hidden for so long. As evening approached, my phone rang with my father's number. I answered with some trepidation, unsure what to expect after the emotional day. Jamie, he said, the name still sounding stiff on his lips, but deliberately chosen. Your mother tells me you had a good conversation. We did, I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. It meant a lot that she came into the city. He cleared his throat, a familiar sign of discomfort. She's suggested dinner, at the house, when you're ready. She mentioned that possibility, I acknowledged. I told her I'd like that, but with certain expectations about how I'll be addressed. And treated. Yes, she conveyed those boundaries. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, as if the very concept of his child setting boundaries was novel. I want to be clear that, while I'm still adjusting to this situation, I will make an effort to respect your wishes in my home. The formal, almost contractual nature of his statement was so characteristically Richard Taylor that it almost made me smile. He was approaching this like a business negotiation, careful to establish terms and expectations up front. I appreciate that, Dad. Your mother suggested the weekend after next, he continued. Saturday evening, if that works with your schedule. I think it would, I said, mentally reviewing my calendar. Yes, that should be fine. Good. He paused, and I could almost see him debating whether to say more or end the call. Finally, he added, I've been reading some of the materials Walter recommended. Medical journals, primarily. The evidence for biological factors in gender identity is more substantial than I had realized. It was such a Richard comment. Clinical, focused on data rather than emotion, approaching my identity as an intellectual puzzle to be solved, rather than a human experience to be understood. But it was also, in his way, an olive branch. An acknowledgement that he was trying to understand on terms that made sense to him. I'm glad you're doing research, I said, carefully neutral. There's a lot of good information out there. Yes, well, another throat clearing. I should let you go. I'm sure you have plans on a Saturday evening. Actually, I was just going through some old photographs Mom gave me, I said, seeing an opportunity to share something personal, to build a small bridge. Including that career day when I insisted on being called Jamie. Remember that. A pause, then a soft exhale that might have been surprise or recognition. I do, actually. You wore my blue suit jacket. It came down to your knees. I loved that jacket, I admitted. It made me feel right somehow, like I was finally playing the correct part. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice held a note I couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps, or simple reflection. There were signs, weren't there? Things we didn't recognize at the time. The admission, small as it was, felt monumental coming from my father. Yes, I said gently. There were signs. Your mother says... He hesitated. She says you've been Jamie all along, that we just didn't see it. That's how it feels to me, I confirmed. Not something new, but something that was always there, just hidden. He was quiet for so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he said, "I'm trying to understand that perspective. It's challenging to reconcile with the child I thought I knew. But I'm trying. That's all I can ask," I said, meaning it. After we hung up, I sat among the scattered photographs, thinking about the unexpected turns the day had taken. My mother, bringing physical evidence of my journey and acknowledging the signs she had missed. My father, admitting there had been clues all along, making a halting effort to see me through new eyes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the unconditional acceptance I had once dreamed of. But it was movement, slow, uncertain, but unmistakably forward. And for now, that felt like enough to build upon. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Verdict on the mom meeting? Scale of 1-10, 1 being family disaster movie, 10 being Hallmark. Special. I smiled, appreciating his attempt at levity. Solid 7.5. Better than expected. Lots of good talk, some old photos, plans for dinner at their house in 2 weeks. Dad called after. Actually used my name. "Holy shit," came his immediate response. "That's at least an 8. Celebration drinks tomorrow? Or are you going to Chris's game night?" "Rain check on both. Need some processing time, but next weekend for sure." "Roger that. Proud of you, man. Takes guts to rebuild on new terms." His words stayed with me as I carefully placed the photographs back in their envelope. Rebuilding on new terms. That's exactly what we were attempting. My parents and I, trying to construct a new relationship on the foundation of truth rather than pretense. Whether we would succeed remained uncertain. The ground still felt shaky, the future unwritten. But for the first time since Thanksgiving, I could envision a path forward that included my family. Changed, challenging, but present in my life in a way that honored rather than erased who I truly was. Outside my window, the city lights blinked on as dusk settled over Boston. Somewhere across those lights, my mother was likely telling my father about our conversation, sharing insights and observations. Perhaps they were arguing or processing, in silence, or slowly finding their way toward acceptance. I couldn't control their journey any more than they could control mine. What I could control was my own path forward, living authentically, building connections with people who saw and valued me, establishing boundaries that protected my truth while leaving room for growth and reconciliation. It wasn't the story I had expected, but it was becoming one I could embrace. Complex, imperfect, but ultimately mine to write. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing once again on my parents' porch, heart hammering against my ribs as I raised my hand to knock. This time, I wasn't hiding who I was. This time, I arrived as Jamie, wearing a charcoal suit with the silver compass tie pin Chris had given me. My mother opened the door, her smile genuine if somewhat nervous. "Jamie," she said, the name natural on her lips now. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The house looked the same, yet felt entirely different. The familiar living room where awkward family gatherings had played out for years. The dining room where my identity had been revealed in the most unexpected way. But tonight, there were no guests, no pretense, no hiding. My father stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in hand, his standard position when uncomfortable. But as I entered, he set the glass down and stepped forward. "Jamie," he said, the name still stiff, but deliberately chosen. "Thank you for coming." The formality might have seemed cold to an outsider, but I recognized it as his way of showing respect. Richard Taylor did not use words casually. Each one was selected with precision, and his choice to address me as Jamie carried weight beyond the simple syllables. "Thanks for having me," I replied, matching his tone but adding a small smile. "Something smells amazing." My mother jumped on the neutral topic. "Pot roast, your favorite, and I made that chocolate cake you always liked for dessert." Dinner began awkwardly, all of us hyper-aware of the profound shift in our family dynamic. My mother filled silences with questions about my work, careful to use my name and correct pronouns. My father spoke less, but listened intently, watching our interactions, as if studying a foreign language. Halfway through the meal, he surprised me by asking, "How is the Westfield project progressing? Walter mentioned you've been instrumental in identifying potential pitfalls." It was the first time he had acknowledged my professional identity as Jamie, recognizing the work I did as myself, rather than as the daughter he had imagined. "It's going well," I said carefully. "We've restructured some of the risk assessment protocols based on market fluctuations. Mr. Henderson has been supportive of the changes." My father nodded. "He speaks highly of your analytical skills." "That means a lot coming from him," I said, the unspoken implication hanging between us. "Does it mean anything coming from you?" My father seemed to catch the silent question. "You've always had a gift for financial analysis. That hasn't changed." It was as close as he could come in that moment to saying, "Some things about you remain the same, even if others are different than I thought." After dinner, my mother brought out photo albums, not the carefully selected images she had shown me at the cafe, but the full family history, unfiltered. Together, we paged through them, revisiting moments now colored by new understanding. "You always did hate those Christmas dresses," my mother observed, pointing to a photo where I stood scowling beside a decorated tree. "The bow ties weren't much better," I admitted, gesturing to a formal family portrait where I wore an uncomfortable suit with a ridiculous red bow tie. To my surprise, my father chuckled. "You ripped that thing off the second the photographer finished said it felt like being strangled by a festive hand." The shared memory created a moment of connection, my father recalling my words exactly, acknowledging my discomfort even if he hadn't understood its source at the time. As the evening drew to a close, my father walked me to the door while my mother finished packaging leftovers she insisted I take home. "This was better than I anticipated," he said, his formal manner giving way to something more genuine. "For me too," I agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I may never fully understand, but I'm beginning to accept that I don't need to understand, completely to recognize that this is who you are." The admission caught me off guard. "That means a lot, Dad. Your mother and I would like to make this regular, perhaps monthly dinners if your schedule permits." I nodded, emotion making words difficult. "I'd like that." My mother appeared with a container of leftovers, saving us from the awkwardness of further sentiment. As I prepared to leave, she hugged me tightly. "We love you, Jamie. Always have. Always will." Driving back to Boston that night, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, hope, lingering sadness for the years lost to pretense, but predominantly a sense of possibility. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of potential. At a red light, I checked my phone to find texts from both Marcus and Chris, one asking how dinner went, the other inviting me to join their friends for a late movie if I needed to decompress. Two different worlds, now existing simultaneously, rather than in careful separation. Friends who had known and accepted me from the beginning. Family slowly learning to see who I had always been. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be missteps and difficult conversations, moments of regression and painful reminders of the past. My father might never reach full understanding. Some relatives might never accept me, but something fundamental had shifted. I was Jamie, at work, with friends, with family. One person, whole and authentic, no longer fragmented across separate existences. As the light turned green, I sent quick replies to both messages. To Marcus, dinner went well, real conversation, baby steps. To Chris, thanks for the invite, heading home now but rain check? And thanks again for the tie pin, wore it tonight. Then I continued toward Boston, toward home, toward the life I had built and was continuing to build. One honest interaction, one authentic moment, one courageous truth at a time. Up next, You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.